I got hit with a $12,000 invoice from a homeowners association I never even joined, for a house they didn't own, on land they didn't control, because apparently my greenhouse was too nice for their taste. Yeah, that happened. One minute I'm naming my cacti and trying to remember when I last wore real shoes. The next minute some powered HOA president is treating my property like a hostile takeover target. You know what I mean? You leave tech to get away from chaos, and chaos just puts on a blazer and finds you anyway. Let me back up a sec. 2 years ago, I sold my tech startup, and instead of doing the cliche founder thing, yacht, penthouse, weird car with doors that flap like a wounded gull, I drove halfway across Colorado and bought this slightly beat up, strangely perfect old house on almost 2 acres of land. The place sat right on the edge of a suburban neighborhood. You know the kind, matching mailboxes, matching smiles, matching gossip, all ruled by a homeowners association called Meadowvale. The magic words for me were on every document that mattered. My parcel number was separate. The plat map had a big clear line around my lot. The deed and title literally said not subject to any HOA. Past or present. I checked that so many times my lawyer got tired of me. For the first time in years, I had silence instead of Slack notifications, dirt instead of deadlines, mornings where I stood in a frayed robe, bare feet in the grass, drinking herbal tea and sketching greenhouse designs on napkins like some retired wizard. I wasn't building an app anymore. I was building something real, glass and wood and soil, a greenhouse for rare orchids and desert succulents, a tiny kingdom of fragile, stubborn things that somehow felt more honest than half the boardrooms I'd ever sat in. I started naming them. My friends from the city called it a midlife crisis. I called it therapy. I had a cactus named Gary, an aloe named Squinty, and a growing sense that I'd actually slipped out of the machine. Then one Tuesday afternoon, there was this knock at the front door that did not sound like FedEx, did not sound like the confused solar salesman who always missed his turn. It sounded official. I opened the door and there she was, in pastel slacks and a blazer that practically announced, "I chair 3 committees and I win every argument," holding a clipboard like a weapon and smiling like a campaign ad. "Hi there, I'm Karen Barton, president of the Meadowvale Homeowners Association," she said, all sugar and teeth. "Just stopping by to welcome you to the neighborhood." She handed me this glossy pamphlet full of stock photos of happy couples standing in front of aggressively beige houses, and I could already feel my blood pressure tick up. I thanked her. I was polite, but I told her straight, my land wasn't part of Meadowvale. It was outside the boundary, legally separate, not under the HOA. Her smile twitched, just for a second, like I'd told her gravity was optional. Then she recovered. "Oh, I understand, of course," she said, voice coated in syrup. "But everyone contributes around here. It's how we keep things harmonious. Just something to consider." Then she floated back to her spotless white SUV and disappeared in a cloud of air-conditioned entitlement. And I thought, okay, that was weird, but whatever, just a bored HOA president stretching her influence a little too far. About 3 weeks later, I open my mailbox and there's an envelope with no return address, just one of those very important-looking labels, Resident, Important Community Update. I'm thinking, great, maybe it's a block party, or a reminder not to leave trash cans out, something harmless. I open it, take one look, and nearly choke on my coffee. It's an invoice, a real, itemized, official-looking bill with the Meadowvale HOA letterhead at the top, and a total due of $12,847.77 at the bottom. Attached is this note about how, due to architectural enhancements on your property, notably the greenhouse structure and landscaping upgrades, your property has been reclassified as a Category A estate, which includes premium HOA participation rates. Please remit within 30 days. Signed in swoopy self-important ink, Karen Barton, President. I stared at that thing like it was written in crayon. I called the number at the bottom, didn't even introduce myself, just said, "Karen, I think there's been a mistake. I just got a bill saying I owe the HOA over 12 grand. My property isn't part of Meadowvale." There was this little pause. I could practically hear her adjusting invisible pearls, and then she goes, "Mr. Caulfield, we recently updated our jurisdictional boundaries. After reviewing property values and community cohesion priorities, your lot now falls under the extended HOA map." It was a board decision. Like she'd just redrawn the map of Europe after lunch. "You what? You just decided my property is now part of your HOA?" I asked. "Yes," she said, completely calm. "You're adjacent, your property value impacts the community, and your greenhouse, well, it's quite prominent. We believe inclusion benefits everyone. My pulse was so loud I could barely hear her. I rattled off my deed, my survey, my title insurance, all saying no HOA, and she just sighed like I was being difficult. Times change, Justin. You have a beautiful home. Prestigious. You should want to be part of Meadowvale. Consider it an investment in shared values. The next day, there's a printed, revised HOA map taped to my gate, my lot literally drawn in with pen and ruler and highlighted in pink, with new boundary. HOA approved scrawled underneath like a middle school group project. 2 days after that, another envelope, second notice, this time with late fees mentioned. And then the city got involved, or at least it looked that way. A certified letter showed up from development and compliance, the kind where you have to sign for it and maybe pour yourself a drink before you read. It said my greenhouse was under review due to multiple complaints about zoning violations, and, my favorite phrase of all time, aesthetic compatibility with surrounding properties. Suddenly there were concerns about glare endangering drivers, potential heat waves affecting adjacent gardens, disruption of architectural harmony. They made it sound like I'd built a death ray, not a glass box full of orchids. What really set my teeth on edge wasn't just the paperwork, it was the smear campaign. I started seeing screenshots from the HOA's Facebook group, Karen posting, "Neighbors, please be advised that a property adjacent to our community is actively in violation of standards and has refused to cooperate. Legal action is likely forthcoming. Our property values matter." Someone asked who she meant, and she straight up posted a photo of my greenhouse with the caption, "Some people grow weeds, others grow problems." Folks began piling on, talking about how they'd noticed the glare, how it felt hotter, near my fence. One person even wondered if my greenhouse was messing with their Wi-Fi. Then one of the HOA compliance volunteers actually walked onto my land. No knock, no permission, snapped photos from a few feet away, and posted them online with, "When you don't follow the rules, you shine a little too bright." That was the moment I understood. This wasn't nosiness anymore, it was an organized effort to isolate me, discredit me, and eventually force me into their system. By that point, I was waking up every day half expecting a SWAT team in polo shirts and khakis to rappel down from a drone, leaf blower in one hand, violation slip in the other. And then came the day everything snapped. It was a Friday. I'd just finished repotting this rare succulent I'd grown from seed, a Chrysula Buddha's temple. I'd named him Gary, we had a whole vibe going, and I heard this low rumble outside. Not a truck I recognized, not my tools. I walked around the side of the house and froze. 3 guys in high, vis vests were on my lawn with a trailer half on my gravel, half on the grass, one trimming the edge of my wildflower patch like he owned the place. "Hey," I yelled, storming over. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" The crew chief looked up, confused and apologetic at the same time. "We were sent by Meadowvale HOA," he said. "Says here you're overdue for compliance maintenance. Bring landscaping into visual alignment with community standards." Before I could explode, I heard her, Karen's voice drifting over the fence like mildew in July. "Oh good, you're already getting started," she called, strolling into view in a matching workout set and a visor, carrying a canvas tote that said "Leaders don't wait." She waved like we were at a bake sale. "It's not just your property, Justin," she said when I told her to get her people out of my yard. "It's adjacent, and what happens here affects the whole neighborhood. You've declined every chance to integrate, so we took initiative, the HOA voted. It's for the good of the community." I grabbed the folder from her hand, blurry printouts of zoning lines that someone had attacked with a pen, little arrows labeled, "Justin's house equals HOA soon," like it was a battle plan on a napkin. I told the landscapers to pack up and leave, dropped the word "trespassing" in exactly the tone that makes people move faster, and then I looked her in the eye and said, "You or anyone you send steps on my land again, I will get you charged, and I am not bluffing." Her smile cracked, just a little, and she tossed out, "Most people would be honored to be included in Meadowvale. We don't usually have to force community spirit," before retreating to her SUV and nearly backing over one of my solar path lights. That night, something switched off in me. The part that kept hoping this could be solved with one more polite conversation, one more phone call. I stopped reacting and started planning. I called a real estate attorney named Diane Brooks, recommended by a guy in my garden club who once beat a zoning board in a legendary koi pond dispute, which is exactly the energy I wanted. Diane showed up at my kitchen table in a blazer, with a briefcase and steel-toed hiking boots, and when I finished telling her everything, The fake map, the invoice, the Facebook nonsense, the unauthorized yard crew. She just muttered, "Oh hell no," and started pulling documents like weapons. She'd already pulled the official HOA boundary map filed with the city back in 2010. My parcel wasn't just outside it. It was specifically listed as exempt. Their little Sharpie addition? Legally, it might as well have been drawn on a placemat. Then came the twist. Someone inside the HOA board, apparently sick of Karen's little empire, sent Diane an anonymous batch of emails. One of them said, "We can't legally force him in, but if we raise enough issues through zoning and visibility complaints, he might fold. Start with the greenhouse, people hate that thing." There it was in black and white. This wasn't about harmony or rules, it was a strategy, a siege. Diane drafted a blistering cease and desist, a formal complaint to the city, and a 12-page response packet that laid out every piece of proof that my property was independent: deed, plat, title, zoning history, plus security footage of the landscaping crew on my land. Screenshots of Karen's posts and those emails. And then, because we're both a little petty in righteous ways, we added a civil lawsuit against the HOA for libel, slander, trespass, attempted fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. You try watching your wildflowers get shredded, and tell me it's not emotional. The day we walked into court, I could feel the energy was different. There were neighbors in the benches, some curious, some clearly rooting for someone, a few giving me these little nods like about time. Across the aisle, the HOA board sat in a neat row, looking like a catalog spread for overdressed and deeply uncomfortable. Karen was at the end in a peach-colored blazer that had seen better years, hair perfect, smile tight, knees bouncing just enough for me to notice. Diane opened with this calm, surgical rundown: my deed, the city, filed map, the reclassification invoice, the photos of my wildflower massacre, the internal emails about making my life miserable until I broke. The judge kept raising his eyebrows higher and higher, until finally he stopped her and said, "You're telling me they tried to redraw legal property lines with a marker and then bill you for it?" Diane nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, and then they attempted to enforce that imaginary boundary with financial threats and physical intrusion." When Karen took the stand, she tried that same syrupy tone she'd used on my porch, talking about community standards and protecting property values, and how I just refused to collaborate. But Diane slid those printouts of her Facebook posts across the table, the one calling me a threat to safety, the one saying I was hoarding invasive plants, and you could see the air leak out of Karen's confidence. Then came the email thread, and the HOA's own map with my parcel marked exempt, and whatever narrative she'd constructed just crumbled. The judge finally leaned back, looked at the board, and said, "What I see is a homeowners association that stepped well beyond its bounds, literally and legally, into harassment, defamation, and attempted fraud. This is not how communities are built. This is how they are broken." The ruling came down like a hammer, in the best possible way. The HOA invoice was declared null and void. My greenhouse was confirmed as 100% legal and protected. The association was ordered to pay me damages, $415,000 for repairs, legal fees, and yes, emotional distress, and Meadowvale HOA was placed under state oversight for a year. Karen was removed from her position by emergency board vote, so fast her blazer probably got whiplash. Somebody in the back actually gasped, one person clapped before the bailiff shut it down, and I just stood there, not gloating, just breathing for the first time in months. Justice didn't feel abstract anymore. It looked like a tired judge who'd had enough of Sharpie empires. 6 weeks later, my life feels like a weird little sitcom spin-off. Karen moved out. Rumor is she went to some gated community where she's not on the board, which honestly might be the greatest punishment the universe could design. The new HOA board sent apology letters to half the neighborhood, people who'd been fined for things like overly enthusiastic Halloween decorations and audibly squeaky wind chimes. A couple of my neighbors still drop off baked goods like I'm the guy who slayed the dragon, and in a way, I guess I did. The real trophy, though, sits right in front of my greenhouse, sunk into the ground like a gravestone for nonsense, a 6-foot wide bronze plaque that reads, "Built without HOA permission. Thriving ever since." And underneath, in smaller letters, "Do not touch." Especially the cactuses. My cactus collection has exploded. Over 40 species now, each with a little tag and a petty Latin-ish name, Corinus expulsio, tall and prickly and oddly familiar, Vulvus bureaucratica, invasive and hard to get rid of. A creeping vine I trained up around my no trespassing sign that I call Snoopy Medlium. To celebrate, I threw a backyard party, the Cactus and Karma Festival. No rules, no fines, just a band, a taco truck, a piñata shaped like a clipboard labeled violations, and neighbors laughing in my yard like it was the most natural thing in the world. As the sun set, I raised a glass of lemonade by my greenhouse and said, "To gardens without boundaries and neighbors who mind their own damn business," and everyone cheered like they'd been saving it up. Now every morning, I walk barefoot across my land, past the plaque in the greenhouse that caused a suburban war, and I feel this deep, ridiculous, wonderful sense of peace. Not because there will never be another problem, but because I remembered where the line is and I stood on it. It's funny how something as small as a greenhouse can expose all the cracks in an entire system, how a few panes of glass and some orchids can make you ask who really owns what, and where community ends and control begins. Somewhere out there, I like to imagine Karen driving past a cactus garden and getting an itch she can't quite name, and here, in my little patch of Colorado, there's a squat, mean-looking cactus with her name on the label. Literally. So let me throw this back to you, because I'm genuinely curious. Where do you think the line is between protecting the neighborhood and flat, out abusing power? When does community standards turn into bullying? And if you were in my shoes, would you have paid up and kept the peace? Or gone to war over a greenhouse and some stubborn little plants? Drop your thoughts, your HOA horror stories, your wins, your losses, whatever justice looks like where you live. I read that stuff, and who knows, maybe your story is the next one that reminds some overzealous committee that a person on their own land is not a box on a map you can just redraw. You know what I mean?